Hi, I'm Rick Richardson and welcome back to the Salary Step Up series. Now in this step, this is step 8, we're going to be talking about key skills. Now these key skills are going to be the ones that you use in negotiating and presenting your pay request. So I'm going to scroll a few over the screen while I read them off to you. These skills are presentation, directing and controlling the conversation, agenda memorization, emotional control and restraint, active listening, reading body language, environmental factors, and negotiation. So, do you feel that you're proficient in all of those, or do you feel which ones you may be a little weaker at? Do any of them make you nervous? And hopefully you're not seeing this as, oh my gosh, I don't have any of those skills and they all make me horribly fearful of this overall process. I want you to do that. I want you just to kind of look at these skills and say, okay, I'm okay with this one. I'm a little weak here, and this one I'm not good at all. And we're going to go back and help you develop each of these skills. I'm going to give you little techniques as we move forward, and these techniques are the ones that I recommend to people to master these first. Even if you go on to do other negotiations and presentations, you want the basics down first. And these basics are easy to learn, and they're something that you can implement right away. Okay, so the next step is to keep it simple. What you need to do with this is you need to identify the skills, so that's what we just did. And then you want to find a way to learn these skills, whether that's through a mentor or just reading about them. And then the third step is to practice them. And then when you practice them, you want to practice them to a point that you become proficient and comfortable with them. The first thing I want you to do is learn how to stay calm. Now, the reason for this is the first step in this process of learning how to stay calm when you're learning a new skill is because if you become frustrated, then you don't have the ability to memorize. Your mind will get taken up with all of the, I can't do this and I can't do that kind of thoughts. What we want to do is become calm so that you can do it and do it smoothly and as simple as possible and relaxed, and then you'll learn it and it'll internalize much easier. If you have a frustrated attitude, that rigid, frustrated attitude is actually a protection that your subconscious is throwing up, and that is to protect you from harm. So as long as you understand that there is no reason to feel fearful of learning a new skill, then you should be able to push that aside. Now, that's easier said than done if you don't have a couple of techniques. Let me give you the most simple and effective technique that I know. This one made huge differences in my life when I learned how to do it. It's really going to sound simple, because it is. It's deep belly breathing. Now, this operates for very specific reasons. It operates because you have certain nerves that run through your abdomen down at your diaphragm, and when those are stimulated, it causes your body to release chemicals that will cause you to be relaxed. Now, without going into the details of why that is, the way you do this is that lay down on the floor, put a book on your belly, and take a breath, a deep breath, and you want your stomach to fill first, then before your chest. So if you're breathing and all your breath is kept up here, it's a very tense and short breath. If you're breathing down low in the big, deep, slow breaths, it'll calm you down. Now, there's a physiological reason why that calms you down, but you don't have to know all those details. All you need to know is how to do it. When I find myself getting a little stressed or tense in a conversation that might become a little bit heated, or a negotiation that things aren't going quite right, I find that if I just slow down my breathing and start doing some deep belly breaths, do them in through your nose, out through your mouth. One way, if you wanted to learn how to do this, is to say the word relax and just go relax. So it's in with the re, out with the lax, with just a pause in between. So it's just do it like 3 or 4 times. It really is amazing how it works. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the presentation. We want to keep it simple because when we keep it simple, it's easier for you to memorize, and therefore you'll feel more comfortable quicker and feel more relaxed when you're presenting it. The next part of it is that if you deliver that confidently, professionally, and to the point, it carries a power with it. It's a more direct approach to it. You'll be able to maintain your audience's focus, in this case your boss, by not dragging on and droning on about all these different things and getting them mired in the details. You want to pick your facts, make sure that they make your point, and then be prepared to answer objections. You don't have to present all the material that you have, but by having all of the material, you will be prepared to handle any objections. You need to stay in control of the conversation. Now, when I say stay in control of the conversation, I'm not saying to dominate the conversation. If you have an attitude that you're dominating the conversation, you are conveying a negative. You want to be very inclusive and you want to make yourself open and have a very warm conversational approach to it. But you want to stay in control, and the way I recommend you do this is to have an agenda. And if you memorize that agenda, you will be able to move through the process quickly and effectively and professionally, making your points and moving on. So you want to stay in control of this conversation. And one of the things that will come up from time to time is that if a person you're talking to becomes uncomfortable or unfamiliar with part of a conversation that you are having with them, they'll tend to want to shift the conversation maybe just a few degrees to something they feel more comfortable with. And that might even be happening on a subconscious level for them because they don't want to feel uncomfortable. So even though they may not say it, they might not even be really conscious of it, they may want to bring up some other aspect that is not in your agenda. It's okay to let them go and stray a little bit. Let them say what they want to say, acknowledge what they've said, and then bring them right back to the agenda. Do it very smoothly and carefully and acknowledge what they've said. So when you're doing that, they'll feel comfortable with you being in control of the conversation. All right, now I want to talk about memorizing the key points. There's a technique that's really easy for everybody to use, and it's easy in two key aspects of it. One, you're going to use a familiar location. We're going to use your house as an example in this case. And the second part is to make the reminders that you'll see in this familiar location dramatic. You want them to be unusual and dramatic so that the picture is very vivid in your mind. Think of it this way. How often do you see an elephant riding a unicycle through your living room? Probably never happened. And so if in your memory aid you had an elephant riding a unicycle through your living room, that would be very memorable. So let me tell you how this works. First, you stand outside your front door. Envision that front door. Now close your eyes and think about opening the front door and walking in and what you see. Okay, open your eyes. It's real easy to do. So what I want you to do is use that same visualization process to memorize your key points. Let's assume that you have 5 key points to your presentation. As you stand in front of your front door, imagine that painted over the front door in fluorescent spray paint is your first key subject, your key point. Now, that's not going to, hopefully not there when you get home, the fluorescent paint with your key subject. You don't need to do it, you just need to visualize it. So if you can see that in your mind's eye, open the door, move inside, and what's the first room you come to? In my case, it's a living room, and it's on my left-hand side. So as I move into the house and I look to my left, I see my living room. Let's say I do see the second key point of my presentation, and that key point is actually held on a flag that's being held in the trunk of an elephant that's riding circles around on a unicycle. Now, the more you can link this to the actual key point, the better. But since I'm talking in real generalities at this point, I'm going to leave some of it vague. I want you to become real specific with it. If there's a reason that the elephant makes sense, or that be a bear, or that it be something completely unrelated to that. But it needs to be dramatic. So now, as you move forward, you get to the dining room. And on the dining room table, you see a 3-layer cake. The 3 layers is your third presentation point. And written in the frosting is the presentation point. And this cake is just really elaborate and very colorful, and it's just amazing. And so you have your third point. Go to the bathroom down the hall. You see written on the mirror in lipstick and something else that's dramatic about it. Very memorable. There's your fourth point. As you move on to the bedroom, you see a bright white comforter. The whole bedroom has been changed out in white linens, and in red rose petals you see your fifth point. All right, so there's your 5 points. And now it's real easy to remember them as you move through this process, because you're just walking through your house. And as you're walking through your house, you've got these mental pictures that are so vivid. They'll be real easy to recall when you're in the presentation, as you're moving through it. You can use this for everything in your life that you have to memorize. So using this technique of memorization will help you become more comfortable in the process, because you'll already know that you aren't going to get thrown off track. And if you are thrown off track, you'll be able to get right back on it. You can have multiples of this too, by the way. Your presentation may have a subset in the presentation. So imagine that you're walking through your house, and then you get to a part where you have 5 subsets or subjects inside of your presentation. You might be in your kitchen at that point, and in the kitchen you may have 5 drawers, and in those 5 drawers each one is a different subject. But you can see those 5 drawers because they're always there. That's reality. What's in those drawers will be different. Make it vivid, because that's where it's going to become memorable. The next part I want to talk about is memorizing scripts. In memorizing your scripts, now this is where you write out your presentation as a script, just like you're presenting a play. And you're going to memorize what that is. Now, you don't need to memorize it word for word. What I want you to do is read it over and over and over. And I want you to read it out loud. And if you want, you could take a digital voice recorder or whatever you have handy, record it and play it back to yourself. If you take each aspect of your presentation, those are your key points, and then you memorize it as if you're in that room, or wherever your memory aid is going to be placed, and then that will link back to it. Now here's the thing. I don't want you to memorize word for word, because I want it to internalize, so that if you wrote it out and it was perfectly worded, I want it to come back out as just your regular conversation. It's kind of like what I do in these videos. If you are reading along with the newsletters, you're going to see that I don't follow the same script, but I do hit the same points. I'm telling you something that I already know and that I've linked to specific words, but I'm not actually going through verbatim. I guess if I had a teleprompter or something, I could do that and I could just read it off like the nightly news people do. But what I'm talking about is that this is how I want you to present to your boss. I want it to be something that you've internalized, and that you then present it with just your personality and how you naturally talk, your mannerisms. I do a lot of this hand stuff, and I want you to do whatever's natural for you. When you do get to certain points, you can emphasize it. You can use your hand gestures. You can do all the little things. You see politicians do it all the time. Bill Clinton doing this thing. You do something, but it needs to be natural to you. It's not what you want to take on this other persona as much as you want to internalize what you want to say and then convey it through you. All right, the next step is the negotiation skills, and I'm going to go into that in another step. So for this point, I just want to identify that it is a skill that you're going to need to become more proficient in. One thing I want to say at this point is the negotiation skills, that when I teach them to people, I don't want them to think that this is only used when you're sitting down across the table negotiating out, hammering out a detail, buying a car, or negotiating a pay raise, those types of things. I want you to see negotiation as something that you do every day, because we do it every day. This is where you're talking with friends about where we're going to go to dinner or whatever. They might be very immaterial as far as like the big picture, but it's how we communicate, the give and take, that reciprocity that we have with one another. Now, if we take that natural feeling of things that we do all the time and we convey that into our actual negotiations, we can bring some warmth and humanity to that process. And later on, when we go into the negotiation skills in more detail, I'll cover that. And I want you to understand that when we get to that point, I'm going to be talking more factual and do this and don't do that. But I want you to always remember that I'm wanting you to take this information, internalize it, and then it comes back out in your personality. The next part is to stay cool and stay in control. What I want you to do with this is I want you to be aware of your own emotions and your own reactions. If you find yourself getting a little out of control, agitated, your boss has said no to your request, or they have brushed it off, they've not paid you the respect that your request deserves, I want you to be aware of your own emotions and your own conduct so that you can remove yourself from that situation and reconvene. It's totally okay for you to say to them, well, that's disappointing. I need to think about this, and then excuse yourself. If you can do that and have an out already programmed for every situation in your life, just say, well, that's disappointing, or I was hoping this would go differently. Anything like that. You come up with what's natural to you. All right, but stay cool and stay in control. If the breathing technique works for you in that situation, then that's all you need to do. You'll get refocused and go back at it. If you can't refocus, don't let your emotions run away with the situation. All right, let's talk about active listening. Active listening is not just hearing what people say, but it's hearing what they say, understanding why they say it, and watching to see how they emotionally are conveying what they're saying. In active listening, it involves you taking a physical posture so that you're making eye contact, but you're not staring, that you are hearing what they say, trying to interpret it, but don't jump to conclusions. So when you're listening to someone talk and you're active listening, they will feel that you are genuinely hearing what they say, and they will build an affinity for you in that. It's oftentimes really obvious in relationships when you hear someone say, well, my spouse doesn't listen to me, and those types of communication breakdowns. And it's because you become too familiar and too assuming that the other party just knows that you're listening and that you care about them. Now, when you do this with your boss or other people at work, you're actually going to do some things where you repeat back to them what they just said, just to say, well, if I understand you correctly, you're saying X, Y, Z. And they say, yes, that's what I said. And then you can go on. Use a little pause in between what they say and what you reply with. So when they finish talking, give it a little thought and then say something. The opposite of that is interrupting them. You're not actively listening if you're interrupting. If you're just chomping at the bit or champing at the bit to throw your 2 cents in, you're not actively listening. So listen intently, listen to what they're saying, acknowledge what they've said, and you'll win them over. This is something that we're wanting to do sooner rather than later so that we build this rapport with your boss. We're going to talk more about rapport. So let's talk about body language. Now, people don't just talk with their mouths. In fact, studies have shown that the vast majority of communication is nonverbal. We read body language all the time. It's natural. It's what we grew up doing. It's part of who we are. It's internalized. But what I want you to do is bring it external. I want you to think about it. I want you to watch for it. And I want you to interpret what you're seeing. So when you see somebody carrying themselves in a particular way, is there confidence or is there a lack of confidence? Let's do a couple of extremes. One would be like if the shoulders are drooped forward and they're always looking down, they're probably a bit depressed. If their shoulders are back and they're upright and they're walking with a purpose, they're more confident. So as you see these people moving through the day, you can interpret where they're at emotionally, and when they say something, if they are doing some things, now obviously you can study up more on body language and understand that things like if they cover their mouth when they're saying something, there might be more likely that they are lying, unless of course they're eating a salad at that point, and maybe they're just covering their mouth. So when you're talking about body language, you have to be careful not to overinterpret. But when you get to know what your boss's body language is, you will be able to see how your message is being received when you present your presentation for your pay request. So if you are paying attention to what your boss has as their normal body language, their normal mannerisms, then when you can observe your boss in more extreme situations, in a conversation where you know they were irritated, where they may have been in a very stressful situation, possibly firing someone or dealing with a very stressful situation at work, when you can interpret what they're doing, and when you can see how they carry themselves in those situations, you'll be able to interpret how they're going to be reacting to you when you are having your presentation. If you start to see them looking away, or leaning back in their chair, or crossing their arms, things that might convey that they're shutting down. Another one would be as if they're listening very intently and they're nodding their head in agreement. They might be agreeing with you as you move forward. So look at the body language now, so that when you get to the presentation, you'll have some basis to understand where they're coming from. Okay, now I want to keep this process moving as quickly as possible, and I don't want these videos to become too long, so I'm going to cut this one down at this point, and we're going to revisit some of these parts in their own steps. Moving forward, I want you to continue to think about these skills, how you're going to develop them, which ones you're strong, which ones you're weak, and where you're going to have to spend some time and energy in developing them. So as we move on to step 9, I want you to have written down your list of your skills that you want to develop and give them a bit of a priority. And we'll move on to step 9. All right, thank you very much for watching the Salary Step Up series. I'm Rick Richardson. Look forward to seeing you in the next one.